Hi everybody. So this video is going to go over the basics of Python Flask, and we're going to make our first web application using this framework. So Flask is just a framework that allows you to create web applications using Python on the back end and HTML and CSS on the front end. And so the first thing I'm going to do is click on this plus sign in Replit. And we're going to use Replit here because the learning curve is a lot less steep with something like Replit, and that is because it hosts the website automatically for you, so you don't have to go through all of the grunt work of trying to host it yourself, which is a whole other thing to learn, which we aren't going to do here. And so first I'm going to type in Flask, and then I'm going to call this my first Flask app, and I'm going to call and say create REPL. All right, and now I'm going to run the code. And so as you can see, this is just going to load some libraries and stuff, and then it runs. And right away, we have a hosted website, which is super cool. So if I just click this plus sign or this arrow here, then you can open this in a new page, and you can send this website to anybody and they can open it. So it's hosted for you right away. And right now it just says hello world. And so there's our website. And so now let's talk about how this was made based on this source code. So this first line is just the import statement to import Flask. The second line is we make a new Flask app object. And so we have app, which is its name, equal to Flask, which is the constructor for a Flask app. And then that's it for that. Then in line 4, we have something called an app root. And so this is something that is important to know for anytime you're writing a web application. And so app.root, what this does is it tells basically it tells the website what function to run, what Python function to run when a certain root is entered. And so the first root is just slash. And so what that means is this is basically just the home page. So it is like your basic website. So if I go back into here and I copy this and paste it into here, if I just put a slash after this, it winds up just being like the same thing. So it just means that it's slash nothing. So that's my home page. And so we're going to look at making other subpages later on, but for now we just have one app root and it just loads the home page. And so what does my function do? So I'm defining a Python function. It really helps to know Python ahead of time, at least a little bit for this, and to learn also HTML and CSS. So if you don't know anything about either of those languages, then that is really important to figure that out beforehand. And so def hello world, this is our function in Python. And then all it does is it returns a string. And in this case, the string it returns is literally just HTML code. So here, this is h1, which is just our header tag, and then hello world, and then slash h1. So say I wanted to make this into like a paragraph tag instead, then I could just do p instead of h1, and when we run that, then the text gets smaller. And so any valid HTML code would run fine here. Let's work on making another subpage. And so in order to make another subpage, I need to make an app root, write another app root. So I'm going to say app.root. And then in here, instead of just a slash, I'm going to say slash, and then I'm going to call this subpage. And so this would be whatever URL extension you want there. And so after your app root, you need to pair that with a Python function. So I'm going to say def, and then I'm going to call it subpage. This doesn't have to be called the same thing as the URL root, but sometimes it's easier to just have the same name. So we call this def subpage. And then in the subpage, we want to, return some different HTML code. So I'm going to say return, let's return an h3 tag. H3. And inside the h3 tag, I'm going to say this is a subpage. And so now if I run this, and I try and open this up, and at the top of my URL bar, I'm going to do /subpage, and then right away it goes to that subpage. So again, I just put subpage, like /subpage in the URL bar, and then it loads the next website. So pretty cool. Next thing we're going to do is make a new function, and in this case, we are actually going to have it that function take a parameter. And so I am going to make another app root. And in this case, I want to be able to say hello to a certain person. And so here, instead of just always having the exact same subpage name listed here, I am going to give it a slash, and then I'm going to have the app root take a parameter. And so in order to do that, we use open pointed bracket and close pointed bracket. And then we say the type of variable. So in this case, it's a string, then a colon, and then I want to name the variable. So I'm going to call it name because it is the name of the person that I am saying hello to. And so again, this is the variable name, and this is its type, and we put it inside of pointed brackets so that Flask knows that that is going to be a parameter that is taken when the URL bar is called. And so then we are going to write a function, and I'm going to call this def hello underscore name, and then that parameter needs to be the same parameter name that is referenced in the app root. So this is going to be name. And then in this case, why does that keep doing that? In this case, I'm going to return, and I'm just going to copy this from above. So I'm just going to do the same type of tag, but now instead of using this is a subpage, I'm going to say hello, then plus, then close quote, then name. Sorry, the close quote should go here, plus, then name, then plus, and then open the quote again. And so what this does is it says, okay, hello plus name plus close the tag. We can even do exclamation point after this so that it's like, hello name, something like that. And so what we're doing is we're just concatenating this string value and this string value with the name variable that gets passed in as a parameter. So now we have to figure out how do we actually pass that value in as a parameter. So I'm going to stop this and run it again. And I'm going to also show you how you would run this automatically as you go. So we'll talk about that in a little bit. But so the first thing I'm going to say is I'm going to open this web page again. And now in the URL bar, instead of saying subpage or whatever, I'm going to say Lauren. And so I type my name in, and now it says, hello, Lauren. So like if I change this and I say Bob, then it says, hello, Bob. And so anything that you say inside here is just going to call that function, which is that app root. Now, if I did subpage, Now notice that it would call the subpage, and that's because it's going to default to the first one that it reaches in the file. And so in this case, if we see exactly that it says subpage, it's going to reference this first one first. All right. Thing that we're going to talk about is what happens if we don't want just like one single line of HTML code in our return statement. What happens if we want to actually return an entire HTML file? And so you can do this too. First thing we need to do is at the top of our code, we need to specify that we want to also import something called render underscore template. And so what this does is it is a library that allows you to now render a certain HTML template when you're returning a value using Flask. And instead of just returning like straight up HTML in here, I am going to return render underscore template. And then let's use index.html. All right, great. And so now when I run this, right now I'm getting an internal server error, and that's because index.html does not exist. And so what we need to do here is we need to, first we're going to add a folder, and it's important that all of our HTML files are in a folder called templates. So first I'm going to make a folder called templates, and then I'm going to add a file there, and I'm going to call it index.html. And so now when I run this, notice that index.html is going to get loaded. Some HTML code into here. So I'm going to Google search like HTML skeleton, and I'm just going to use like W3 schools, and I'm just going to copy and paste just like a basic HTML skeleton because I don't feel like writing all this like header tag stuff out. And so I'm going to paste this right into here, and I'm just going to change a couple things. So for example, I am going to, let's see, I'm going to call this, instead of page title, I am going to call this my first web application. And I'm going to get rid of this image tag for now. And we'll keep this. This is a heading, this is a paragraph, this is another paragraph, etc. And so now when we run this, now my index page says this is a heading, this is a paragraph, this is another paragraph. Great, lovely. And so now this entire index.html page gets loaded when I render my index. And so if I go to my subpages are still going to work based on what I type in the URL bar. We'll get into using buttons and stuff like that later on, so in the next video. There's just one additional thing I want to show you now, and that is how we can take the variable that I passed in here and be able to get that into my index.html page, because basically what we need to do here is we need to somehow link the Python code, which is here, and this name variable, which is called name, and we have to link it into index.html, which is HTML code. So we have a Python file and an HTML file, and we need to somehow get those to be talking to one another. And so here's how you would do it. Copy this return render template from up here, and I'm going to put it here like that. But now instead of just rendering the index.html template, I also need to give this a parameter here. And so the way you would give this a parameter is you could say something like name equals name. What you have on the left-hand side does not have to match what the parameter is, but what you have on the right-hand side does. So you could have just also said something like x equals name, but you'll see pretty often that everyone just kind of calls it the same variable. So name equals name. This way you don't have to come up with two variable names and then you're trying to figure out which one is which and stuff like that. So you can kind of just use the same one. And so what this does is this makes a variable that's going to be recognizable in your HTML code. And so now when I run this and this works, I'm going to go in and be able to go into index.html, and I'm going to be able to reference name now because it's getting passed in as a parameter here. And so when I go into here, instead of, I'm just going to delete that this is a heading, this is a, and I'm just going to use one paragraph. And it says this is another paragraph. And instead, I'm just going to say hello. And then the way that I get the name variable inside of my HTML code, or really the way I use any like Flask Python variable inside of HTML, is you need to use double curly brackets. So you do a single curly bracket and a double curly bracket, and then your variable gets referenced inside of these. And so these curly brackets are basically telling HTML, don't use regular HTML code here. There's going to be some sort of Python-ish code that's going to go inside of here. And in this case, it's just a name, but you can put all sorts of things inside of double curly brackets. You can use you can write if statements and for loops and things like that, but it's a little bit different than normal Python syntax. And so we'll talk about that in a little bit. And so now when I run this, at first it's just going to say hello, comma, because name doesn't exist yet. It's not there. But then if I open this up and I change my URL bar and I say /Lauren, then it's going to say hello, Lauren, and it's because it's running that other app root. And so again, using those double curly brackets allow me to take a variable from main.py and transfer it over to the HTML code. And that's it for this video. We're going to do another video on how to use forms and variables even more. And so stay tuned for that one.